Alright, hello and welcome back to my 2.5D RPG in Unity tutorial. Today we're just going to be implementing quite a basic weapon system, so where we can give NPCs or a player a weapon object, and if they click they can shoot, and the weapon will rotate to face the mouse or some kind of target that you pass in as a vector 3, and the sorting order changes based on where you're rotating. So if you're facing up it'll be in front of, but if you're facing down it'll be behind and whatnot. And also we've got this NPC which will shoot the player if they get a line of sight on them. So as you can see, this rock is blocking us at the moment, so the NPC can't shoot us, but if we move up a bit then they will shoot us. And we don't have line of sight, line of sight, don't have line of sight, line of sight, and so on and so forth. So let's go see how we did this. So first off, we have a weapon controller script which I wrote with the same principle as with the human in mind, as in the human controls all the individual parts of the body, whereas the weapon acts sort of like an interface between the player control script and the actual human components and the actual weapon itself. So what we have here is a load of variables. We've got a sprite renderer, which is just the sprite renderer for the weapon that the person has equipped. The human for the weapon controller is attached to. The object of the weapon that's been passed in. So this will be the instance that's attached as a child game object to the either NPC or the player. The weapon item, which is a script that controls the weapon, or controls the shooting of the weapon and where it should spawn the bullets and stuff like that. So that's just stored under my weapon. And a boolean for saying whether we have a weapon or not. So that's just set in this set weapon method. In the start, we just have a call to say that my human is this.getObject.getComponent human, because if we look on the player, the weapon controller is on the same sort of torso object as human, and likewise with the NPCs. Weapon controller is on the same as the human bit. Okay, so first off, we have a set weapon method, which basically gets passed in an object as a prefab, which will be the weapon that you want to give the person. We'll instantiate a new instance of it. So we'll spawn it at this object's position and rotation, just so it appears with it. Then we decrease the y-axis slightly by creating a new vector 3 from the x and y coordinates of this object's or the weapon object's current position, which will be the same as the transform as the person object at that time, but it doesn't really matter because we just use the my weapon object. It doesn't really make a difference. We take away 0.4 because that leaves it roughly where the hands are, so it kind of looks a little bit better. And finally, we set the my weapon object .transform.parent to be this .transform. So the weapon is now a child game object of the person that it's attached to. So it'll move around a bit and all that stuff. Then we assign the sprite renderer of the my weapon object to the SR value. And we also do the same for the my weapon value for the weapon item script on the new instance of a weapon that we've created. And finally, we set has weapon to true. Where is it? First now, the next method we got is weapon control. This is basically sort of like a method I created so we could call the direction, all the visual controls under one sort of method call. So we've got basically we pass in a direction of what object or where you want the weapon to face, and if we do have a weapon, then we call the weapon direction control. Should we flip the weapon and set the weapon sorting order for the direction? I'll go through all of these. So weapon direction control. What this does is it basically rotates the weapon so that it is the NPC is aiming at the vector 3 that was passed in. So we do this by using mathf.atan2. We pass in the position to face.y minus the transform.position.y of this object, and we pass in the position to face.x of the and minus the transform.position.x, and that gives us the angle it needs to be in radians. And to convert that to degrees so we can pass it into Euler angles, we just use the mathf and multiply the final result of mathf.8and2 by mathf.rad2deg, which is radians to degree, conversion of radians to degrees. And we store that under z because we want to change the z-axis because that's the one we rotate on. And finally, we just call myweapon.transform the Euler angles as a new vector 3. We set it to 0, 0, and z. And that is what controls the rotation of the gun. Next up, we have a should we flip weapon, with again takes to vector3.pos2face, and we're checking if the position to face is x value is more than the x value of this game object. So that would say that it's on the position we want to face is on the right. So we don't want to flip the y-axis of the sprite render of the weapon. But if it's on the left, so the x value of the position is less than our current x value, then we do want to flip the y-axis. So I'll just show you this in a second. So I just click play, press P to get a weapon. So as you can see, I'll just select the weapon so you can see it happening. Test weapon. So as you can see, we're facing, the mouse cursor is to the right of the player. So it doesn't flip the weapon, but if we turn to the left, it does. So no flip, flip. And that's basically just so, because if we didn't, when we were facing to the left, the gun would appear upside down, and that's not something we want. So, it just makes everything appear correctly. Finally, the last method is where we set the sorting order. Again, we're taking the vector3 of the position to face, and we're checking if the y value of the position to face is more than this .transform.y. And if we are, we're assuming, all right, the player is looking up, so away from the camera, sort of, so the gun would appear in front of them. So it would be rendered first, and we wouldn't be able to see most of it, we'd just be able to see the edges poking out. Otherwise, we're assuming the player is facing downwards, so towards the camera, and we set the sorting order to +2, so it appears in front of the weapon appears in front of the player. And this myHuman.getSorting order is a new method I've implemented. I'll show you that in the human. It's literally just returning the sorting order. So yeah, that was the weapon controller. Okay, I also forgot to mention this fire weapon method, which basically acts as an interface between the weapon item and whenever the fire weapon is called, basically. Basically, it acts as a way to call the weapon, the fire weapon method in the my weapon, but it also makes sure that there is actually a weapon there, if you get what I mean. So basically, if you call that, it just checks you have a weapon, and if it does, it fires it. Now we get onto the weapon item. So first off, we have a public game object for the projectile. That is just the bullet that the gun will spawn. And you can replace that with anything, but right now I've just got a normal bullet. I've got a public transform for the projectile spawn position. That is just where the bullet will be created in relation to the gun. I will show you that now on the prefab, how that works. So if I get the gun prefab. Right, so we've got the gun here, and it's got a child game object called bullet spawn pos, and that is just located at the end of the barrel of the gun. So, and you see it's assigned as there. So that's just where it'll spawn the bullet. That's how that works. We also have two floats. One is the bullet timer, which is a timer that counts down between bullets, and another one is the rate of fire, which is what the value gets reset to when the bullet timer reaches 0. And again, so if we call in fire weapon, bullet timer gets reduced. When bullet timer is less than or equal to 0, we create a projectile, and we reset the bullet timer to be the rate of fire. So we can control the rate of fire. So the lower this number, the faster the rate of fire is. And likewise, we have another method to create projectile. It's pretty simple. Just create a game object G. We create the projectile object that we've got stored as a public game object at the projectile spawn pos. Actually, that can just be a position check, shouldn't it? Yep, sorry. and this .transform.rotation. So the actual weapon's rotation, so it will go in the correct direction relative to where the actual gun is facing, whether it be on the player or the NPC. We also have to do this. Another thing that I've got in it to stop bullets accidentally colliding with the object they created, or their creator, sorry, is that we have in the projectile script, which is basically just the bullet controller, we have a myCreator value, which is a game object. And basically what we do is we just store the game object that created it. So in this case, it'd be this.transform.parent, because the weapon item is stored as a child of the game object that is holding the weapon. So that will just get the normal NPC or player or whatever. And if this particular bullet created on this call to create projectile collided with that, it wouldn't destroy it or deal damage because it knows not to. Because chances are it's just like a clipping error or something, or you're not intentionally trying to shoot yourself. So yeah. So next up is the actual projectile script, which controls the bullets once they're fired. It's pretty simple. Like I said a moment ago, we've got the game object myCreator, which stores whatever created the projectile, so whether it be an NPC or a player or whatever. And on collision enter, we check if the object we've collided with is not equal to the creator of the bullet, then we destroy this bullet. We'll insert some kind of code to deal damage or create some kind of visual effect once we got around to that. But right now I'm just trying to get core mechanics sort of in place, so we can have some kind of prototype to work with. And yeah, and otherwise we transform.translate to the right of the objects, multiply that by 10 and time.delta time, so it's all smooth and consistent with the frame rate and whatever. And then we just have a quick timer that counts up to 20, and if the timer reaches more than 20 without being destroyed, it will just destroy the object, so we don't have like bullets travelling on forever if they don't hit anything, basically. That's all for the projectile. All right, so next up we have sort of like a basic action for an NPC attacking the player. So half of this is just a rip, me copy and paste code from the follow player action. So where basically if we are more than 4 units away from the player, we will call the myNPC and move and face the player's position. Otherwise, if we are less than 4 units away from the player, then we will just face the player. And we have the myNPC. If myNPC is null, we'll just get the component here. But we also have a slightly different one. Oh, here's where the changes come in. We've got a weapon controller instance, which will get the weapon controller attached to the NPC. And sorry, just gonna yawn here. So if we are less than 20 units from the player, so this is basically just a check to make sure that there is a reasonable chance of the player hitting the of the NPC hitting the player, because if they were like 100 units out, then they wouldn't have no chance to hit them. So it'd be a waste to try and raycast as well to see if there was a line of sight. But you could like change this value to be the range of the weapon or whatever, but that might come later. So what is ray to hit player? Basically it's a raycast to see if there is a line of sight between the player and the NPC and returns true or false based on that. So if we don't have a weapon, just in case this was called for some reason, or by error or bad coding or whatever, then we return false. So saying we've not got a line of sight, so don't call this wc.fire weapon. It just returns an error. If we do have a weapon, however, first off we call the weapon control. So this will make the weapon like sort of be aimed at the player. And next up we draw a raycast. So we get 2 vector 2s. The first is the origin. This is got from the weapon controller .myweapon, which is, so we're on the weapon item here, and we use the projectile spawn pos.transform.position for both the X and Y. and that is where we're going to start the raycast from. So where the bullets get spawned, we start the raycast there. And the direction is a new vector 2. It is basically a vector 2 of the player's position with the origin subtracted from it, which would be the weapon projectile position. We've also got a distance value, which is a vector2.distance from the origin and direction, which might not actually be correct, but I think it is. So that just gives us like a float of how long the raycast will have to be, so we don't like do it unnecessarily long or something. And finally, we store the raycast 2D hit under physics 2D. We get a hit, so this will return anything what the raycast has hit using physics 2D.raycast. So we're saying where we want to start the raycast, where we want the raycast to go to, and the distance we want the raycast to, or the length we want the raycast to be. And we also have a debug.drawRay, so we can get a visual representation of the ray in the world. So I'll just show you that quickly. Press P to give us a weapon. NPC. Sorry, that's not the right NPC. So yeah, as you can see, there is a cyan line from where the bullets are being spawned to the player object, and not any longer. And that is just showing us like their line of sight. So can the player see an EC or not? And likewise, if we do that, the line of sight gets broken, so you can see that the ray is hitting the player, or the rock, sorry. So we can't get a line of sight to the player, so that's returning false. So likewise, if our hit.collider.tag, so if the hit.collider.tag or is either player or player limb, then we return true, saying we've hit the player. Otherwise, we're returning false, so we've not got a line of sight on the player. And if any of these conditions aren't met for some odd reason, we just return false. So yeah, a couple of new things to note there. First off is we've added a tag for player limbs. This is because the player has separate components. So we've got head. Actually, these shouldn't be tagged as player. We've got to change that. Oh well. 1 second. No, that's layer. Sorry, my mistake. That was correct. So yeah, they have the tag player limb. It's because we're using .get component or like find component with tag player to find the player game object. So we only want it to find the parent object of this, but we still want to register collisions with the player's components. So that's why we have the player limb, just to identify different bits that are the player, but we don't want them to be recognized as the player, if that sort of makes sense, because we just want the player parent object to be recognized as the player. Right, what else? We've also got, I'll have to do the layers after this. Never mind. Another thing I've had to edit is on the project settings physics 2D. I've turned query starting colliders off. Basically what this means is if the raycast starts in a collider, so say if it was started in the NPC's collider for the torso or whatever, it won't trigger it, so it won't register that as the hit. Instead, it'll just like keep going until it hits something else that isn't the NPC. So you want to turn that off. And also, I've added a couple of new layers. So first off, we've got a player, projectiles, NPCs, and the world. So the player is just the player. The projectiles are bullets and stuff. NPC is the NPCs, and the world is just the environment. And one change I had to make was now that NPCs won't collide with the world. That was because occasionally NPCs would get stuck on rocks while pathfinding. So I've decided just to try this out as a solution so that they won't. I mean, they'll still have to navigate around the rocks and stuff, and their raycasts will still hit it, as you can see, so you can like use them as cover and stuff, and bullets will still hit them, but technically they won't actually collide with them. So I'll see how that works as a solution, and if it needs adjusting, I will do so in another part. But yeah, that was just my solution for doing that. And yeah. Okay, so final few changes on human, the human script. I've added a public integer method that returns it. So to get sorting order, which basically just returns the sorting order value for the torso, which is used in the set sorting order method for the weapon controller, just to decide what the sorting order of the gun should be. Next up, I believe it was on the player controller, I've added a weapon control method, which basically just calls the weapon control to move, make the weapon face the mouse cursor in the world. And if the player holds down the left mouse button, it will call the wc.fireWeapon method. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So let's just try this again. So again, we've got no weapon, but if we press P, we get weapons. And that's one thing actually. I've just basically bound the giving weapons to the test input. So if player.get key down is keycode.p, then the player.get all the player and the NPCs are given weapons. So we set weapons, we just pass in the weapon prefab that we store it here, and we store that under, what is it? This is stored under, I think test input is, the test stuff is on the camera. Sorry, yeah. So the test weapon stored there, and we just pass in the prefab instance of the weapon, and yeah. So that is that. As you can see, so the NPC will shoot us, and the weapon will face us, and it'll look all right when we've got left train of thought. So yeah, the NPC will follow us and try and shoot us if we've got line of sight again. But if we break line of sight with an object, so say a rock or something, then it will stop shooting. If we shoot the rock, then it hits the glider with it. I think I need to add the objects, something to control the sorting order of bullets, but whatever. And yeah, that's pretty much that. I know I need to add some kind of mechanic to stop the NPC using just going in straight lines rather than try pathfinding if the line of sight is broke. So I will do that at some point. What else? So yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, if we can find the other NPC by following these blue lines, yeah. No, they're not. He's not facing us. He's just carrying his gun because he's not actually got anything to set it. So yeah, yeah. So that was that. Like, comment, subscribe, all that shit. A quick announcement that Loud or Quiet is now. Well, I've started the process to get it on Steam. So I've started integrating Steamworks, and I've got the store page, which is currently under review. So I will probably post a separate announcement video for that. So if you would like to check it out, it would make me very happy. So there'll be a video on that whenever it gets approved by Steam. It should be fairly recent, soon, because the review process takes like 3 days, and it's the third day, I think, but American time will be slightly later than mine. So yeah. Other than that, there's not much else really. I think the next episode will be on sort of basic items and stuff. So we can have like maybe an inventory system and picking up items in the world, and we'll be able to work that in with the weapon items, so you can pick up and drop and all that shit. So yeah. So cheers for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Again, I'm just repeating myself. And yeah, goodbye.